Alright, we're going to do another podcast, this time on the different things that we have the ability to monitor with regards to the mechanically ventilated patient. So up for discussion are going to be 5 different things. We're going to talk about a peak inspiratory pressure, or a PIP, a plateau pressure, or a P-plat. We're going to talk auto auto-PEEP, and on the pressure side of things, and then if we talk about measuring volumes, we're going to talk about VTE, or exhaled tidal volume, or SPVTE, and that is spontaneous exhaled tidal volume. So peak inspiratory pressure, that's going to be the highest pressure on the inspiratory phase. If we're in pressure control ventilation, you're going to set the PIP. If we're in volume-based ventilation, you're going to measure the PIP. So if we talk about measuring a peak inspiratory pressure, we're talking that we're measuring resistance in the airway. But it's not just the airway. It's everything between the ventilator and the bottom of the lungs. Everything from lung tissue to bronchioles to the main stems to the trachea to the ET tube to the vent tube, being everything. So if you have a change in your peak inspiratory pressure, say a sudden increase, it's not necessarily a lung problem. It could be anything from the side of the ventilator. It could be a kink in the tubing. It could be a big goober in the ET tube, or it could be a problem with the lungs. What I want us to think about is our goal for a peak inspiratory pressure is to maintain a PIP less than 40 centimeters of water pressure. And that's going to be the highest pressure that we hit when we deliver a volume of air over a set time. So remember, in volume-based ventilation, we're going to set an inspiratory phase, or an I time, and when we hit the preset or the set tidal volume over that period of time, we're going to measure that peak inspiratory pressure. Peak inspiratory pressure, airway resistance. Think of those as synonymous terms. Now a P-plat, or a plateau pressure, on the other hand, actually measures lung compliance. So when I say a plateau pressure, what I'm doing is I will do an inspiratory hold. So when the patient hits that peak inspiratory pressure, I'm going to perform an inspiratory hold maneuver and basically cause the patient, or that breath, to hold the air in for about 2 seconds and let the air kind of filter its way out and settle, if you will. And when I shoot that measurement, I'm going to assess lung compliance. And this is the level of lung tissues, so alveoli, parenchyma, etc. So if I have an elevated plateau pressure, that's going to tell me I'm causing damage to lung tissue itself, and my goal is to maintain my P-plat less than 30 centimeters of water pressure. So we're going to hit that peak inspiratory pressure. We're going to perform an I hold maneuver for about 2 seconds. And then that's going to measure out a plateau pressure, and that's going to tell me actual compliance of lung tissues, and we want that less than 30 centimeters of water. Now auto-PEEP, it's exactly what it sounds like. It is the PEEP that's created by the patient's natural physiology. So if you have a patient who has COPD or real bad asthma and they're air trapping, well, that air inside that closed circuit is going to create a pressure. So we're going to measure auto-PEEP by performing an expiratory hold on our ventilators. If we're and during the expiratory hold, that will tell us how much pressure is left in the lungs. Now the thing to remember about auto-PEEP is it's in addition to mechanical PEEP. So if I have a patient who's pulling an auto-PEEP of 5 and I'm giving them a mechanical PEEP of 5, then they have an actual PEEP of 10 centimeters of water. And there's some different strategies to reducing auto-PEEP that we'll discuss in great depth in the future. So our goal for auto-PEEP is 0. Patients should not be retaining anything that we don't want them to retain. They should not be air trapping, and therefore should not create any extra pressure other than what we set on the ventilator. So as we see here, we hit our peak inspiratory pressure, we have our P-plat there that we did with our inspiratory hold, we have the actual PEEP that's measured for our patients, and then we're going to go ahead and perform that expiratory hold maneuver to measure out the auto-PEEP. So total PEEP is auto-PEEP plus mechanical PEEP. Exhaled tidal volume, or VTE. So exhaled tidal volume can be measured on either volume-based ventilation or on pressure control ventilation. With pressure ventilation, it tells us, how well is that pressure controlled breath actually working. So if I start with my pressure controlled breath at say 20/5, and on a standard adult we're only pulling a 300 cc tidal volume, well then I probably need to go up on my pressure a little bit to see if we can't create more accurate tidal volumes. On a volume ventilated patient, it can kind of lead us into a key of air trapping. So if I'm delivering a 500 cc tidal volume to a patient, I expect that some of that's going to get lost in the circuit, into dead space, and patient should exhale about 450 cc's of tidal volume. If they are, I'm watching my patient and they're exhaling 450, 430, 420, 410, 400, well then they're probably starting to air trap, and then that'll key me into checking for auto PEEP and correcting an underlying cause. Now, spontaneous exhaled tidal volume, this is the volume that's created on the spontaneous breaths. So if you're in assist control, either pressure targeted ventilation or volume based, it should be pretty darn close to the regular exhale tidal volume, right? Because if your patient's in AC, either volume or AC pressure, and they take a spontaneous breath, well, they're going to get exactly what they would, they're going to get the exact same assist as they would for a controlled breath. So your spontaneous tidal volume should be pretty close to your actual tidal volume for volume AC or pressure AC. Now for pressure or volume SIMV with pressure support, that's going to fluctuate a little bit depending on what your patient is pulling for that specific breath and what your pressure support's set at. So we set our pressure support for 10 centimeters of water. That's a good jumping off point, either for volume SIMV or pressure SIMV, and that can tell us, or that's going to take workload off of your patient. So we're going to measure that spontaneous exhaled tidal volume, and we're looking for about half of what the actual exhale tidal volume is on the controlled breaths. And if we're not hitting about that 1/2 of regular exhale tidal volume, then I'm going to increase my pressure support because my patient's having to work too hard for those spontaneous breaths. So we're going to increase the pressure support by 2 centimeters of water pressure at a time, and then observe for some good changes with those spontaneous exhale tidal volumes. I hope that provides a little bit of clarity to the different things we can measure for patients who are mechanically ventilated, and we will work next time on troubleshooting and what do we do with these different measurements.